the younger demographic is likely to be one of the first to bounce back. Do we think there are cultural and regional differences in how quickly people will want to revert to their previous habits? Paul, what do you think about that?
I wanted to see who's going to go first then. I think there will be regional differences. I think that we might, particularly this year, have a lot more staycations, and maybe that's how our immediate sort of hotel buoyancy restarts. It could be that the four-star market that previously relied heavily on business travel will now see an uptake in local travel, and people being able to drive. Again, from the UK, maybe Northern Europe, with ferry travel might become more attractive than flying. But I think generally it's going to be younger people that are leading the way, and certainly of my parents' generation are less likely to travel this year, I think. But I think as the vaccine comes in, as times move forward and we relax back into the new normality, whatever that might be, I think everybody will start travelling. Culturally, I'm less clear on, I think, personally. You know, certainly if you look to the Far East, you know, the culture of shaking hands is not there so much. It's more of a nod, more of a gesture, and maybe we'll adopt some of those principles here for how we greet people. But in terms of how they travel, I'm not sure. But I think we were just talking about Italy before we came back and how that's changed. I think it was you, Digby, that was talking about that, and the fact that people are back in the streets and people are back in the cafes. I don't.
Yeah, Digby, would you like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I was just speaking to some colleagues who are obviously based in Italy, where our factory is, and they were saying, yeah, you know, a lot of the piazzas are full and there are terraces outside and people are outside, but people are wearing latex gloves, face masks, and these small perspex screens, so we can, you know, have our cup of coffee, but have sort of this perspex screen between us. So that there's definitely a huge desire for people to get out, and I think, Paul, you were saying before we started the call, you know, you live near a main road and you've noticed the increase in noise. People are naturally becoming frustrated at the lockdown. There's a natural desire. I think, you know, humans are social creatures, right? So we don't do well in isolation. So there is that desire to get out and to meet people. Regardless of the age group, I think all people want to interact. It's just, how quickly they will do that. And
we've definitely got lockdown fatigue, haven't we?
Yeah, I think that's very, very noticeable, at least where I am in London. Things feel busier outside. And in terms of, you know, globally, it's purely speculative, but given that that in Asia they have had things like SARS before, and we've seen South Korea has had a very effective response initially, from what I understood in the news. Not that I'm a medical expert, but as an outsider, it seems to be very effective. Maybe they will come back quicker because they've seen these type of measures in place before, they've responded to these type of things before, so maybe they will feel more comfortable more quickly, but that's very speculative. Whereas to me, living in London, this is a very new experience. Feels a bit more scary because it's never happened before.
I would tend to think, exactly like you said, in Asia, they have seen their shares of pandemics or epidemics in the past couple of years. I think they will probably take this a bit more lightly than we are in Europe, experiencing this really for the first time. A couple of factors that will affect, I think it's really depending on where you are, but staycations or local domestic travel will obviously be the first one to ramp back. Generationally, I do believe the younger people will be the ones traveling, but I think the reason for travel will start becoming also more family oriented, and the fact that you haven't seen people in your vicinity, and there are possible factors that you could tie into also cultural differences. It would be interesting to see. I think anyone's guess at this moment is equal.
One of the things we've seen a lot over the last year or so in hospitality and real estate is the co-everything phenomenon, co-living, co-working, communal spaces. I mean, even hotels and apart hotels have been designing increasingly small units, but placing more emphasis on communal space. How do you think that is going to change, and what will people be willing to share? Do you think, for example, shared bathrooms and shared kitchens in co-living will still be viable going forward, or is that taking it a step too far? Paul, what do you think from an architect's perspective?
I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but my gut feel is that a lot of the co-living spaces tend to be a younger generation anyway, where they seem to have less fear of the virus, and they seem to have more of a happy-go-lucky attitude to life still. And so actually a lot of these spaces, I think, work. I mean, a lot of co-living environments, they still have their own little kitchenettes in their rooms. Maybe the main shared kitchens will be less used in the short term, and they'll start cooking in their rooms. And I think as well that like a lot of spaces which are shared, like co-working spaces, are already linked to service department buildings or buildings where there's private space already. And sectors like service departments, particularly with in-house, in-room facilities, I think will make a big difference. And also we're seeing a lot of uptake at the moment of online classes, gym classes and yoga classes. Perhaps people will start to do them in their rooms more than utilize the communal space as much. But I think it will very quickly return to normal, to be honest. And I think, again, it comes down to a generation. There's very few, my parents wouldn't go and stay somewhere with a shared bathroom down the corridor, you know, and they're not looking for that kind of environment. But younger people with their hostels and shared accommodation, it's part of being young, and I think it'll come back very quickly.
I've seen quite a few rooms recently that aren't big enough to do an exercise video or on yoga class, so that might have to change.
Maybe do some finger exercises.
Nicolai, you have a workspace brand as well as hotel brands. How do you see the sharing of space evolving in that sector?
You know, it's in our DNA kind of when we look at the project that we don't go in with a set mind whether something should be an office space or not. We try to kind of measure all possibilities and see what brings the best and most balanced outcome. I think sharing is still going to remain in the forefront. People are now more and more used to work on distance. I think people want flexibility. So although people may be traveling, we don't know how the restrictions are in terms of office space. So if you're talking a normal 500-room hotel with a daily departure of 400 people, arrival and departure of 400 people, that type of traffic, I think, will become less and less attractive to people. So if you're able to capsule off more of a organic and dynamic environment for people to spend time with less people, however equally efficient, I think that is really what it comes down to. So you can't expect 100% occupancies on a traditional service anymore. You might be able to leverage yourself on different type of revenue streams. So I think from a developer or a property owner, that will remain relevant. And as a guest or as a traveler myself, I think that this has even become more appealing to me now during this lockdown period. So I do definitely believe there is a continued trend there.
And Digby, what's your take on how willing people will be to share space in the future?
I think it's all about how comfortable they are. I think the lobby is probably going to be even more important. It's always been the first impression, but now it's also about how safe do you feel? How is that experience? Are there decals on the floor? You know, is there a separate entrance and exit? Think about the flows of people. You know, avoiding bottlenecks. You know, if you have a good property management system where you can do, you know, easy check-in on your phone, you get an email, you just have to go to a kiosk to acknowledge that you're there, and you can check out by email. I think Muse is a good system that I have friends that are still working as hotel managers, and they have been implementing and using those systems, not because they anticipated the virus, but just, you know, because they were embracing technology. And I think those kind of things can go a long way to make people feel safe. And just, you know, very simple things, you know, like hand sanitizers, temperature checks. And it's all about, you know, when you come into a hotel, you know, it's still a fundamental need that you're fulfilling. And feeling safe is part of that. At the end of the day, you're offering accommodation. You know, it's food, shelter, you know, these are the fundamental things. And feeling safe, that's the basics. And if you feel safe when you walk in, and that measures have been taken, I think that's going to go a long way to making people coming back. Yeah, which is all old stuff, right? first impressions and the things, but just in a different way.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think this is an opportunity for hotels and other asset classes to incorporate more flexible spaces? I'm thinking in terms of hotel rooms and apartments. An example would be the Zoku loft, with the pull-out bed and the pull-out stairs. You can. Do you think there'll be more focus on making a room have several different uses at different times of the day with modular furniture and clever design and that sort of thing? Paul, what's your take on that?
Well, it's interesting. You were just talking about smaller rooms, and actually one of the ways you can make a smaller room work is obviously by having flexible space. If we think like Yotel has for years had a bed that retracts into a sofa during the day to give more space in the room, which would allow you to have exercise classes, for example. But yeah, flexible furniture, maybe fold-away beds, allowing your room to feel different during the day, particularly if people are spending more time in their rooms. I think that's very important, that you don't feel that you're working in the same space, that you're sleeping in the same way that you might traditionally. You think Zoku is a good example of that, but likewise Yotel, just in the way that you can slightly amend how your room feels during the day, and then pull out a bed or a futon in the evenings and have some space, and also being able to cook in your room. Obviously, Zoku has that ability too. Yeah.
Nicolai, do you have plans to make your spaces more flexible?
As I said, yes, that is what we do. We definitely see the need, and the trend is more than there in terms of fitness equipment in the rooms, in terms of technology being used in order to, create more of a community where you can easily access and do it all from your own base, basically. So yeah, I do believe that it's definitely going to stay in the trend, and yeah, I'm even convinced that there's more and more projects having to look into that direction. As I said originally, there's a lot of space out there, lobby space. What can you do with it in order to also mobilize some type of revenue streams out of different directions? I think it's a necessity.
I think one thing that perhaps will be changed forever by current events is hotel F&B. I think the amount of space dedicated to F&B is likely to be much less. I think grab and go is going to be much more important. The breakfast buffet, for example, is potentially not going to come back. So what are the alternative uses out there for F&B space? What direction do you think operators and designers should be looking at to repurpose F&B space to make it profitable and of value to the guest?
Well, sorry, on you go.
Go ahead.
No, please.
No, I think, yeah, there's a lot of differences, I guess, country to country. We don't know what regulations will come in. I think also the periods where people have started to reopen. In Vienna, it was 1 meter. In Italy, they started with 4 meter distance per table. This will really be a local decision. The measures you need to take is a straightforward calculation in the end. I think what will come our way is more of a restrictive kind of reservations and a table. You're not going to be able to stand in line and wait to be seated. I think that is what we are seeing also here in Austria. Restaurants opened up basically 10 days ago, and you need to make a reservation. I think this is a bit more of a plannable measure. And in terms of the layouts, I think, yeah, it has to be a bit more simplified. I think you need to start focusing on the areas and look at your business just how it is best sustained. A hotel cannot insist on forcing their own restaurant onto people when there is more out there. And I think just hotels need to look for, or ventures need to look for more opportunities to share what the community has to offer in order to focus on service rather than capture ratio, which is a very traditional hotel model. Yeah, interesting to see. I think this difficult to say how things will look in 2 weeks from now, even.
Yeah. Paul, what's your take on repurposing F&B space?
Well, I think very similarly, we're really thinking they're going to have a lot more space actually between tables, but also I think there's ways that you can start to bring in things like biophilic design. One of the things which people really keep saying is that air changes are important and fresh air is important. And I think that we'll see a lot less lockdown buildings in the way that traditionally we've had a lot of air conditioning and recirculating air. I think we'll have a lot more openable windows. I think we'll see partitions in between tables, potentially with plants. Potentially they could be full height partitions. But there's lots of materials as well where they're saying that any potential virus lives for a less period of time. So, I mean, how much truth's in it, I'm not sure. Obviously, everything's different if you check online enough. But copper seems to be a material which doesn't harbour the germs for a terribly long length of time. Maybe we'll see curtains made of copper chains between tables, or something which allows a design element to be brought into the restaurant, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to be 4 meters from the next table. In some cases, some of our hotels, they'd only have about 3 tables in their rooms. You know, like, we need to be aware that we've got to be practical as well. Digby was saying earlier that, like, you know, they've got these partitions, perspex partitions between tables in the cafes. I think that in the short term we'll see that, but I think we've also got to be aware of the environmental impact of all these, in effect, throwaway items, and come up with a design solution which is more sustainable for the long term and that can be implemented relatively cheaply as well, because realistically we're not going to have these lockdown measures forever. But at the same time, there might be another virus next year. We don't know now, do we? We've sort of all had the first fright now. But if we're going into it with open eyes, what would really work is just having a reusable product that can separate tables temporarily now. Maybe it goes into storage, maybe it can be recycled. But also there's been a lot of outdoor spaces where we've used pods and igloos on tables, and they've become quite trendy and people love them. Maybe there's a way that we can implement something similar to that inside, and it becomes a more of a, I've lost the word, but a sort of an aspiration to go and sit in one of these because it's a bit more fun and it's a bit different. But I think we also need to think about the people that are serving these tables. We've got to be aware that, you know, maybe a face mask isn't sufficient. Maybe we need to think about uniform design. You mentioned buffets there. My gut feel is buffets have probably had their day, at least in the interim. And actually shared utensils when you go up and get from a buffet are just a big no-no. But when you service a table, and we're used to having people come up and down saying, is your meal okay, and do you want anything else? And perhaps it'll be more of a delivery, step back, check, this is your final chance, I'm not coming back to you till the end of your meal kind of attitude to life. It'll be a difference.
Yeah. Digby, we've spoken a bit about building design and room design, but how do you think furniture design might be affected by the way the industry has to go forward?
Well, we're already getting inquiries actually about the cleanability of materials. You know, are there bleach cleanable woven fabrics? You know, the types of surfaces, can coatings be applied? So a lot of it is material selection and how it can be cleaned. That's quite important for people, and also the functionality, how it can fit into these flexible spaces, which I think Paul and Nicolai were talking about as well. Is, you know, how we can use these spaces, because on the one hand, you know, it's all very well for, you know, a professor of virology or somebody to say, look, we all need to be 2 meters apart, 4 meters apart, 6 meters apart. We need to have several entrances and exits. And I understand on paper that that's great. But it also, from an affordability point of view, has to work in a place like London or New York or Paris or Vienna, which are cities which are very densely populated, where space is at a premium. So people are looking at making those spaces flexible as well. And furniture that allows them to do that can be used for different purposes as well. So yeah, I would say the two biggest things that we're seeing is, you know, the material choice. People are asking a lot more questions about the materials that we use and how practical they are, you know, from a cleaning or disinfectant, or, you know, spraying or misting or fogging or whatever kind of treatment people want to do. And also how flexible those pieces of furniture can be in the space. Those are the two biggest things that I'm looking, you know, purely at the product that people are asking already, you know, in anticipation of these spaces.
Now, obviously, you get a lot of antibacterial impregnation and stuff into soft materials, but are you seeing people are moving away from soft materials, looking more towards leathers and hard surfaces that can be more easily wiped, even if just from a perception point of view.
Yeah, the hard surfaces, definitely. I wouldn't say that people are moving towards leather yet, because there are a lot of things that we can do with soft fabrics, which I have become acutely aware of. I wouldn't say that I was as aware of the things that could be done and the types of treatment. It's odd though, because we also you touched on sustainability and you know, all of these materials. A lot of the softer fabrics have a high synthetic, you know, they're not as many natural materials, seem to be better suited to these types of treatments. But again, that's just the very early stuff. We're still very much at the beginning of this. But yeah, I think people are talking about, you know, spraying properties every night with various materials as well, and how that builds up and stuff. So for the moment, I would say that materials with a higher synthetic content appear to be more suited, but that may well change. It's very early days yet, so I wouldn't want to say anything definitive just yet. And also, yeah, from a you know, from a health point of view, you know, how healthy is it to be spraying all of these things on a daily basis through all of these surfaces? I spoke to one friend who's a hotelier who was very much in favor of it, and another one who said, no, I think that that's a bad idea to build up all of these layers of, you know, cleaning agents. So I'm still getting conflicting messages from people as well.
Paul, in terms of building materials, especially at the luxury end of the market, how are designers going to still convey the feeling of luxury while making properties easier to clean and stay hygienic? I mean, you don't want to be paying £500 a night for a hotel suite that's got the air of a hospital ward about it. What materials will come to the fore?
I think, like you say, the idea of a disinfectant fogging machine, leaving a thin layer of disinfectant on everything is potentially not the best impression when you walk into a suite. But obviously, I think that if you think about the journey through the hotel, there's a number of points where there's touch points like lift cars and door handles, and I think that there will be the use of technology a lot more, so that your phone logs you in, your phone connects to the door, and the door automatically opens. And I think that in terms of the way the rooms are done, as Digby was just saying, there's a lot of things that can that materials can be impregnated with that makes them much more cleanly than you might expect. And actually, we don't have to move away from all the soft furnishes entirely. And I think a high level of cleaning is just going to become the norm, and potentially where we might have seen traditionally, you know, some toilets, you get the little liner strip across it saying this toilet was cleaned. You know, maybe we get that on a lot more items. Maybe even things like TV remotes are in clear bags saying this item was cleared and then sanitized and put in a sealed bag ready for you to be used. But I don't think that there's necessarily going to be an immediate move away from curtains and carpets. And I mean, actually, in many rooms we've moved away from carpets already. Got hard surfaces seem to be on trend at the minute. But actually, soft furnishings and bed linens, they're just going to have to be washed, and there's going to have to be some kind of way of telling your guests that they're clean and they've been cleaned, and this is, you know, steam cleaning and all the rest of it happens regularly. But I don't think we're immediately going to walk into a hospital room. Like you say, nobody wants that as much as anything. And perhaps, you know, the guests have a choice about whether there's daily cleaning. Maybe once you're in your room, you're in your room. And if they're staying for 3 nights, they say, well, actually, I don't need somebody to come in every day. And it becomes more of a choice at reception when you check in, or online, hopefully. Not at reception, you shouldn't be talking to a receptionist. And maybe there's a way that the guest has more choice over who has access to their rooms. Things like room service. You know, Yotel again has a robot in the, I think it's their Singapore one, and actually they said there's about a 3-hour wait for that under normal circumstances, because people just want a robot to come to their room. But maybe that will become more normal, and you know, people will choose that they won't have other people coming into their private space. But I don't think that necessarily there's going to be a downgrade in luxurious fittings or finishings. I think we'll work closely with suppliers like Digby, and we'll come up with products which respond to the immediate need.
One of the issues which is quite divisive is just how much interaction guests want with staff in hospitality properties. I mean, I don't know if any of you saw the InSync conference in the last couple of days, but even there were very conflicting opinions. So Hubert Rio from Yotel said that the COVID epidemic has just accelerated some trends that were already there. The main one being less and less interaction between staff and guests. Whereas Sebastian Bazin of Accor said that essentially the business is about people still. I'm inclined to think that people do want increasingly less interaction with staff. And I'm just wondering how design can facilitate a smooth and a satisfactory guest experience with less interaction and stuff. We know about digital check-in, for example, but are there more applications that are down the line that perhaps we haven't seen yet? Nicolai, do you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, I think that trend will accelerate due to what we spoke about earlier. I mean, younger generations will pick up first. They are anyway more keen or more likely to go. If you look into the type of hotel structures there are out there, there are really specific high-tech target. We're operating one of those brands, which is high-tech, really appealing to people that don't want to speak to an employee in the hotel. So I think the options will be extended. I think housekeeping, like we just spoke about earlier as well, will be a choice, will be at times of my choice. If I know I'm leaving the room, that is when it's available. And I think that also will kind of explain how a hotel structure will operate. What you used to have standing front of the house is now potentially needed back of the house to cater to all these kind of live abilities to interact and ask for things, right? So I think this will change gradually, and once we are back to the traditional generations traveling again, you will see the need for all of these angles covered. One thing that will not come back is all people have been used to using technology now in the past 2 months, and I think definitely that cannot just be forgotten overnight. So I'm sure we will see a few things not coming back to us. Overall in technology, I think payment, I think all these kind of gimmicks and vouchers and all of these type of aspects, you start seeing already cities promoting themselves and kind of subsidizing certain percentages to keep business local. I think that is something we'll see more and more. But yeah, the substantiating of existing technologies, I think digital key, mobile check-in is a must now. I think payment methods as well, as we said. Whoever did not accept certain methods before will probably be mandated to force cashless payments.
Mm-hmm. How about at the luxury end of the market? Do you think people at the very top end will still insist on more of a human touch, or do you think even that will be going down the same route?
I think the short term will be also there. You need to adapt, but it might be the quickest way back to a traditional service. But you cannot sit and wait for it to happen the way you want. You need to change. You need to at least give the options of multiple generations feeling comfortable with the service levels and adapt from there. I think we're all in the same boat. Doesn't matter if you're a hostel or a 5-star hotel. You need to go with the flow.
Mm-hmm. Paul, what's your take on technology and how far it's going to go down the line to replace human interaction?
I think Nicolai's right. I think we've all learned that we can use technology a lot better than we thought we could. And actually, can you imagine having a Zoom conference 3 months ago? I think it's quite incredible how we've all emerged from this probably much more tech savvy, and I think that'll just only continue now. I think what you'll see is people doing a lot more of online check-ins. I think we'll see a lot more use of technology through your phones. It's been tested in hotels for years, but it's never really come to the main sort of forefront of everything. And things like there's already apps available which will allow you to log into all your local information through your phone rather than being a traditional binder in your room. I think binders are long gone, but actually leaflets and all those sort of things which you might have found at one point in your room, I don't think they'll exist anymore. I think that we will move everything online. I think that there'll be much more use of online check-in, of keyless access to your rooms, and actually even when it comes down to like the use of Japanese toilets potentially in your guest rooms, so that you're not actually touching anything, and particularly in public areas. You know, over the years we've seen a move towards, you know, a sweep of the hand to flush toilets in public spaces, and actually if you think about airports and a lot of public areas now have these sort of, you hold your hand underneath and the water comes on and the soap comes automatically. I think that'll just become more and more to the forefront of the norm, particularly in public areas. But yeah, technology is just the way forward now. I think, you know, where there might have been a generation that was a bit scared of it 3 months ago. Even my parents are having Zoom coffee mornings now. I mean, that's unheard of. They couldn't get a mobile to work 6 months ago. So.
Okay. One of the byproducts of the lockdown and the restrictions on travel has been the impact on the environment. You know, the clean air, the bird song everybody talks about, the clear water and so on. Is there a danger that when we sort of rush to get back to life as relatively normal as it's going to be, that sustainability is pushed down the agenda? Because I mean, hotels are going to really be, hotels and other hospitality assets are going to be really struggling to be profitable in the first few months or even years as restrictions are lifted. And it seemed to me that sustainability was really starting to climb the agenda fast, and people were really taking notice. And we'd also got to the stage where I think guests were starting to demand it, which I think is a relatively new development. Is that going to drop down the agenda again, do you think? And if not, what are the sustainable technologies that are likely to be incorporated into new designs? Nicolai, would you like to go first?
Yes. I think overall, no, in terms of technology tools, what I would be very keen on seeing is all this social distancing. I think there's a lot of things I've read about possible technology that will kind of gamify the experience and actually incentivize you by having avoided certain areas in a city for travel at certain times, and that is kind of what's being played on a DMO level. However, yeah. Sorry, coming back to the first question, you need to reiterate again, then I will catch up on.
Whether the sustainability agenda will be compromised as hotels struggle to operate profitably when they come back.
I actually believe sustainability will have more importance. If you now see what the next trend will be is all local domestic travel, I think that people, if I'm referring to Austria, this is what the local population wants. Hence, I believe you will see actually a shift and more substantial efforts being made into sticking out in that sphere. You're seeing less flights coming in, you're seeing less volumes coming in, so you need to stand out in a different way. To me personally, I think the one most surprising part, and we spoke about it earlier, is the impact you can see only in a 2-month period. I mean, listening to, I'm literally downtown in Vienna, I hear more birds than I've ever heard before, and you know, you see the impact of it, and I feel it is actually positive in that sense, and I think that's not something that will disappear that quickly. Sustainability for a hotel means, you know, where do I get my produce from? And by default, you have a supply mechanisms that are not really running behind, hence you need to source and potentially source more locally. So I think there will be something that sticks around and actually has a positive in the end.
And Paul, are your clients demanding that more sustainable measures are built into properties? I mean, I guess one of the basic things to realize is that a more energy efficient, sustainable building is cheaper to operate. So, I mean, is this something that you're still seeing high on the agenda?
Yeah, no. I mean, we signed up to this Architects Declare initiative, which is one where architects are signing up to say that there is a crisis with the environment and we need to do something about that even before this happened. I mean, one of the problems obviously with building in sustainability from the outset is that it is an initial investment. So, but like you say, in the long run, hotels become easier to run and cheaper to run if these are built in from the off. But it's also about the way hotels are managed in the long run. But one thing we don't have control of, and the removal of small toiletries in bathrooms and things like that. And I sincerely hope that we don't see a return to people wanting that throwaway, because it means nobody's touched it. I hope that we continue to go along the line that actually it's economically more viable for hotels to have a squeezy shampoo bottle in the shower that everybody uses. But I think we've got to see how that plays out. I would hope, though, that we have learned from this that the environment doesn't take much to, I wouldn't say recover, but have an uplift. And actually, I think business travel will reduce. I think we've learned that working from home is a lot more easy. And if that's the case, then maybe flights will reduce, because an awful lot of flying was caused by business travel. But I think leisure travel will, in the short term, probably not, but in the long term will recover as the desire to see the world comes back. But I think we've got to keep a keen eye on the things we're doing now, and the short-term solutions that the design community is finding to help separate people in communal spaces don't become a massive throwaway issue in 6 months' time. And we use products which can either be used or become built into the interior design. Obviously, it's easier with a new building. You can do something about that now. You're aware of this issue. But retrofitting an older building for a short term with a load of perspex screens, I'm not sure that's terribly sustainable personally.
Yeah. And Digby, in terms of furniture design and manufacture, presumably sustainability is still going to be high on the agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yes, it was true before COVID that, when people ask us for sustainable options, we say, yes, we can do that. The second question is usually, does it cost more? That was true before the virus, and I'm sure that'll be true after it. But I think it's about the right material selection, which is something that Paul touched on, and being able to split those materials out subsequently to be able to reuse them. You were talking about copper and other materials for dividers and things like that. But also the longevity of the product. Can it be reupholstered? Can it be reused? At the end of the day, the number one thing that we can do to be more sustainable is to consume less goods. So if you are purchasing something once and it's modular and it can be reused, repurposed, and this comes back to what we said before, is that piece of furniture flexible? Does it have a variety of uses in different settings? Can we expand it in the future to use it in a different space, or can we split it up and still use it? That flexibility is really useful, because what we find with hospitality is owners want to refresh every 5 to 7 years, and we're going, well, we make a product that's kind of meant to last 30, 40 years. So that's, how do we put those two things together? Because in our mind, making a product that's going to last 30, 40, 50 years is really sustainable. But then if you want to be able to refresh, so it's about how we approach that challenge and listen to those two different things and say, well, how do we make those two things work together? So I think the right material choice and thinking creatively, and I think as Paul and Nicolai said, we've seen a huge uptake in technology. We've seen lots of innovative solutions. So I'm very optimistic that people will continue to be innovative with their solutions. Maybe furniture manufacturers like ourselves, need to think about taking things back at the end of life and being able to repurpose them, or there's a really great company in the Netherlands that they'll give you a 100-year service agreement for their meeting tables. They'll just take them back, sand them down, revarnish them, and there you go. There's your table as new every 20 years. So there are lots of things. I don't think sustainability is going to go away. If anything, this brings to the forefront the importance that changes have immediate impacts that are beneficial, that everyone has been able to benefit from. And I think that it would be very hard to turn people's attention away from the benefits that we've seen in such a short space of time. But that's where we need to be creative and collaborative, with the architects, with the hotel owners and operators, and with ourselves as manufacturers of one of the things that goes into hotels to join the dots. Sometimes it's not really obvious how to do that straight away, but if we keep going at it, I'm sure that we'll find a way to do that. Yeah.
Great. Thanks.
Adding to that quickly, similar answer to before, the generations that will be traveling first are all already asking for this, and that's where it remains relevant. Young people are thinking about this. This is their life ahead of them. This is where their priorities are. So whoever is not on the bandwagon or joining soon, will be lonely.
Yeah, we've had conversations about whether hotels that have a complete sort of ignore sustainability sort of do so at risk now, because actually people won't stay there, potentially, of the younger generation.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to take a couple of questions from some of our attendees now. The first one is an interesting one and a broad one, but it'd be good to have a crack at it. It's from Ricardo Neves. He says, what kind of new companies in real estate do you think can be born from this moment? Like the example of Airbnb in 2008. Who wants to kick off with that?
I'd be very curious to see what happens on the office space environment in general. I think at some stage you will be able to find a desk rented out when there's one available in any type of office. I think this type of environment is moving on. But yeah, I think the biggest change is really in the office environment for the next couple of months, to see how much of this home office space remains, and then that would open up a significant amount of assets for alternative use.
I would agree with Nicolai. You know, I think that, you know, within our company, we've seen that working from home has gone better than we expected. There are still some things that I think that, you know, need to be done person to person. But I think that lots of companies that have lots of leases for lots of office space may actually be realizing, do I need all of this space? You know, how many people can we work from home? Can we do the staggered shifts? Other companies, maybe that's not possible. But I think, you know, Twitter was saying, you know, people can potentially work from home forever. Is that going to start a trend? Is it not? You know, will that challenge, you know, companies like WeWork that already do that? Because I mean, you know, it's very interesting how the office space will change. And you know, I wish I knew the answer, but I'm excited to see what happens, because I definitely think it's something that is changing.
Paul, what's your hunch?
Well, I think at the same time with office space, I think more people will work from home, and I think going back to sustainability, that'll help. You know, people won't be commuting in the same way. But I think as well, like we said earlier, that, you know, we're a social bunch of people, and actually ultimately going to work and having that social side of work is an awful lot of your job, as well as the sort of output of work, and having that liaison with people. So I mean, certainly in our industry, it's going to be harder to be at home permanently. But I think we've got to be also aware of the sort of mental health side that this could have had an impact on, with people working very individually in flats, potentially on their own. And I think that there could be a rise, if they're looking for a new industry, potentially with therapy coming our way. You know, maybe it's going to become more of the norm. And actually, I think the return to work is pretty important to getting people back into that social side. So like we say, it'll be interesting to see whether the sort of working from home continually and forever, if you're Twitter, actually plays out, because actually, personally, I don't see that. I think it's still important to get out there.
Rachel Stevens has asked, how do you think the in-room guest experience will change, and how should hotels be prepared to think differently for future success? Paul, you might as well carry on while you're there.
Well, I mean, obviously, one of the things we've seen is a rise of Uber Eats and Deliveroo and companies like that. And if you stay in a service apartment building, then actually having a delivery to your room is less of a sort of faux pas than if you're staying in a 4-star hotel. And actually, I can imagine that hotels will adapt to say, well, actually, delivery companies are more able to come to the buildings. And in some cases, I'm afraid I can't remember which company it was, but one of the hotel industry, one of the hotel providers was trialing whether they should get rid of their room service and just have a Deliveroo service. And it actually was proving it very efficient and effective. And financially, it was easier for them because they weren't having kitchens open 24 hours a day. And I think they'll see a rise in that. But I think that she's right. Hotel rooms will become people's sort of safe place. And you might find that we're doing more in them, and it will be a pizza left the other side of the door with a knock, and you won't have that face-to-face connection. Perhaps you just open your door and it's there. Or the robots that your hotel have got, that would be great to see that rolled out more. But no, I think people will be in their rooms more. But obviously, then that has a inverse effect on how public spaces are occupied. So in the short term, I think people will be in their rooms.
Yeah, I think.
Like, how do you think your guests will have a different in-room experience going forward?
I fully agree. I think it has to be mobile friendly. It has to be adaptable. More and more fitness equipment if possible in the room. Lots of multifunctional capabilities. Yeah. Room service, I can only agree. I think there are many hotels that have kind of gone away from this. It's a bit frowned upon to have a delivery guy walking into a fancy lobby. I think there will probably be a bit of a logistical change behind the scenes as well, how things are delivered, who is entering the building, etc. But all of those things, ultimately the guest wants to, plug into his normal life with his devices and just exchange address for a few days. I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
I think as well, we were working, for example, the Eccleston Square Hotel here in London. They're very forward thinking when it comes to technology, and we were doing some work with them. And even before the crisis, they had a QR code you can scan, you WhatsApp chat, with the hotel staff. They can send you all kinds of links and information through that chat. But also they have tablets in the room, but also an app that you can download on the phone. And what they're actually doing at the moment is they're talking to local restaurants, both high-end restaurants and more sort of delivery Uber Eats restaurants. Just order stuff to be delivered to the room. So that already exists, and that was a relatively easy switch from what they were doing, because they're also trying to help the restaurants in their area, and they're trying to give the quality of food. It's a boutique hotel. They're trying to offer that to their guests. So I think very much so. That those kind of solutions are already out there, and it's just about them being rolled out and probably improved. This is just a first iteration, right? It's new. Who knows, I could get a gourmet meal delivered soon.
That community focus is been coming into the hospitality industry for a long time, where there's a connection into a place wherever you're staying. You're no longer just in a hotel that you could be anywhere in the world. You want to feel you're in that sense of community, that sense of neighborhood, and actually having those connections to local restaurants, like you say, maybe not just the Uber Eats, but actually some of the nicer ones as well, are important. In fact, a lot of service apartment buildings are saying that very, very few of the guests actually used kitchens to date. Maybe that's changed in the last 2 months, but actually most of them just like the fact that they've got a little bit more choice and actually they can have deliveries.
Gents, we're just about to run out of time. Thank you very much for your time and your knowledge and your input today on this first urban living webinar. I think the technology has worked pretty well, which is great news. We're going to have quite a few more in the run-up. They're starting fortnightly, plus there are a few bonus weeks there. If you go to the urbanlivingfestival.com website, you'll be able to see the full schedule of the webinars. Justin, if you could go on to the next one, please. The next webinar is in 2 weeks' time, and it's about the future of work. So we'll be expanding on something that we've spoken about already today. We've got a great lineup of speakers there. You can see them all listed on the right, so make sure you register for that one. And as I mentioned earlier, these webinars are all in the run-up to the Urban Living Festival 2020, which takes place at Tobacco Dock in London in November. It's going to be a new and innovative kind of hospitality and real estate event based around 3 stages called Stay, Live and Work. And these webinars will be touching on lots of the areas that are going to be spoken about at the conference. So there's plenty of information about that on the website. These are some of the sponsors who are already on board for the event. And if you're interested in sponsoring the event or any of these webinars, please do give my colleague Katie a ring or an email. Her details are there. So it just leaves me to say thanks very much, guys. Really grateful for your help in getting this series off the ground. And I hope you all found it worthwhile out there. And see you all soon. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.